Good evening. I hereby call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. There are 3 items on tonight's agenda for discussion. We have an item which is a presentation from the Police Department on a local lab proposal. We have another item from the Winston-Salem Police Department giving us an update on SWAT. And finally, there is a report on the audit from the Fire Department in reference to personal protective equipment. Items on the consent agenda will be approved unanimously unless a council member wishes them to be pulled for discussion. Council members, I'd like item G2 to be pulled just for a brief update from those who are here who may be listening. Are there any other items that should be pulled for discussion? Item C2. If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move for the approval of the remaining ones.
It's been properly moved and second. All in favor, please show by saying aye.
Aye.
That is unanimous. Item C2, please.
Item C2, consideration of items related to the 2014 Governor's Highway Safety Program grant funding. A resolution authorizing acceptance of a grant from the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program for 5th-year funding for the Forsyth County Joint DWI Task Force and authorizing the execution of an interlocal agreement between the City of Winston-Salem, the County of Forsyth, and the Town of Kernersville to accept grant funding and execution of a mutual assistance agreement between the same parties for continued implementation of the DWI Joint Task Force. B, ordinance amending the annual appropriation and tax levy ordinance for the fiscal year 2014-2015, and C, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
Assistant Chief Weaver, if you would give us a brief summary on this particular item. Chief Roundtree, excuse me.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is additional funding from the Governor's Highway Safety Program. Originally, we received the initial grant during fiscal year 2010, 2011. That was a 4-year grant for the Joint DWI Task Force. The Joint DWI Task Force is members from the Winston-Salem Police Department, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office, and Kernersville Police Department. This particular funding is $121,500 to continue the DWI Task Force for 1 additional year.
Members of the committee, members of the council, I just wanted this pull for a brief summary. Do you have any questions for Chief Roundtree on this item? Councilmember Adams.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Roundtree, at some later date, I'd like to see some data on DWIs in the city of Winston-Salem, probably year over year, maybe the past 3 years.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
If no one else wishes to be heard, I actually had this item pulled. I would entertain a motion.
Second.
Moving and properly second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. That is unanimous. Item G1. Thank you, Chief.
Item G1, presentation on Winston-Salem Police Department local lab proposal.
Chief Roundtree is on the hot seat again.
Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem Burke, Chairman Taylor, and members of the Public Safety Committee. I stand before you this evening to present information about a local lab proposal. I have been in conversations with the city manager and also yourself, Chairman Taylor, about this. As I'm sure you're aware, forensic services play a vital role in policing today and also in the criminal justice system overall. It provides investigators with scientifically based information through the analysis of physical evidence. Forensic science has gained a tremendous amount of attention with TV shows such as CSI, Cold Case Forensics, and also the public is aware of the importance of forensic services. During an investigation, physical evidence and forensic evidence is collected at crime scenes, such as drugs, fingerprints, blood, DNA materials, etc., and it is analyzed at laboratories and is used and presented in court. When processing and testing evidence is delayed, it has the ability to jeopardize cases. It can cause delays in prosecution and potentially affect an individual's rights to a speedy trial. Due to the limitations of the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory, North Carolina agencies are faced with long delays in getting evidence processed. Winston-Salem Police Department and other agencies are forced to use outside agencies for evidence processing in private labs. Also, the fees at these labs are very expensive, and oftentimes we have to pay additional fees for the scientists to come in and provide expert testimony. Approximately 10 months ago, we started researching the idea of outsourcing the process and having a local lab housed in the police department to provide these services for us. I'll go through a brief slideshow just to give you some information about the process. Again, triad agencies, historically, we utilize the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory, formerly the SBI lab. Due to the backlogs and operational challenges, it has created a huge backlog, not only for the Winston-Salem Police Department, but across the state. We have three options, actually four, but I have three that's listed in the presentation. Building and staffing and managing an in-house lab. We could outsource it using testing with an accredited laboratory off-site, or we could outsource it with the testing of accredited lab on-site, or we can just do nothing. If we build and staff and manage an in-house laboratory operated by WSPD, it could be a 2 to 3 year process before evidence could be presented in court. It could also be cost prohibitive due to initial setup fees for the blood alcohol concentration testing and drug chemistry testing. Could range in the neighborhood of $500,000 to $600,000. Salary for a chemist generally is going to be in the area of $50,000 to $65,000 a year, and we estimate that it will require at least 2 chemists. And also, we will have recurring costs in the neighborhood of in excess of $120,000 plus salaries. If we outsource or contract the testing with an accredited lab off-site, we're still going to have analysis costs per test. Generally, $90 would be a low end, $375, $400 in that range would be a high end for a test. Potentially, it could be cost prohibitive. We'll also be required to have expert witness testimony to come in to testify in cases, which could cost $1,500 per witness, testimony fees, and travel costs. And usually, defense attorneys normally subpoena all laboratory personnel that have any kind of involvement in the case. So that could be an additional $3,000 to $7,500 if we chose that option. Just a little background, per year, since 2011 to 2013, WSPD, on average, we have about 891 cases for DWI where we have drug evidence, or blood evidence, excuse me. Also in drug cases, we have over 9,897 cases. So that's a little over 10,000 cases per year that potentially could be tested. WSPD currently, pending in the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory, DWI cases, we have 291. Some of these date back to 2011. Drug chemistry tests waiting to be tested, we have about 76, and those date back to 2010. So a total of about 367 cases that are pending at the State Crime Lab now. If we chose to outsource it, our pending cases at WSPD could be removed or sent back from the North Carolina State Crime Lab and analyzed to eliminate the backlog. Potentially, we could have a 5-day turnaround on all new testing. And if we have large volume of drugs, such as trafficking weight, we could do it. Those testing will require no additional time, probably around 2 weeks to run those tests. If we outsource the testing with an on-site accredited laboratory, this is our recommendation, using NMS labs. We can install and manage the system in the Beatty Training Center. The company can be up and running in about 3 months. NMS Labs is an established, accredited lab with national reputation. It was established in 2006, where they merged with IFL Laboratories, Integrated Forensic Laboratories. Their headquarters in Willow Grove, Pennsylvania. Presently, they maintain successful laboratories in El Paso, Texas Police Department, Lancaster, Texas Police Department, and they also have freestanding laboratories, one being in Bedford, Texas. They're the only laboratory that we researched during our research that has successful experience in installing and operating crime labs in police facilities. And they've performed thousands of DWI tests representing about 42 states across the country. The funding of it, it will cost about $9,000 per month to have a lab such as this. And it will cover all blood alcohol content testing and drug testing for the city of Winston-Salem and the police department. It will be a one-package laboratory where they will completely manage all laboratory operations, the employees, the equipment, the insurance, compensation for the chemists, the accreditation requirements, etc. And they will provide all expert testimony for any case that the chemists are subpoenaed to show up in court. The benefits if we have an on-site laboratory. It'll expedite the analysis and backlog that we presently have. It'll expedite adjudication of the cases going through the court system. Again, it will eliminate the backlog at the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory. We also have the possibility of having higher charges that could lead to trafficking charges. We'll expedite our seizures of assets, which could increase our asset forfeiture funds, which will mean more equipment, more training opportunities for police officers here in the city. It will be more efficient for law enforcement and also could provide a safer community for which we live. Other North Carolina cities that have that operate crime laboratories in-house, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department, Raleigh, and also Iredell County Sheriff's Office. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Members of the committee, I think the Chief has presented a number of recommendations. To me, it boils down to having a contract lab with an accredited lab off-site or with an accredited lab on-site. So I would like to open the floor for discussion. Councilmember Light.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. When we send blood samples off to Raleigh, do we pay them to do that work?
No, that is a service. The State Crime Lab is a service for law enforcement agencies that's provided by the state.
Well, they sure don't do a very good job, do they? I mean, a 4-year backlog? Give me a break. That's, so by your estimation, this would cost us, what, something over $100,000?
Right, about $108,000 per year. It could be less because we would get a reduced rate if other agencies in the area use the lab. We have been in conversations with a few other agencies locally, specifically the Sheriff's Office here, High Point, and some of the other local agencies. They could use it also. But this would be the base rate if the lab just performed all of our testing. So it could be less than this.
Mm-hmm. So there is actually a larger audience that could be brought in. So
yes, because the other local agencies, they're faced with the same backlog that we have using the State Crime Lab.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Councilmember Montgomery.
That you answered one of the questions, and that was whether or not others would be able to use the service as well. The other piece is, in terms of looking at other law enforcement agencies, would this be something that the district attorney's office could play a role in assisting and particularly financially playing a role in? Has that been a conversation that we've had?
Well, we've had a few general conversations. Now, they are very supportive of the idea because it would actually speed up their ability to prosecute cases by getting the lab results back much faster. We've had limited conversations about the funding piece,
I was gonna say.
but I'm not really sure if they would have the ability to provide any funding towards the lab.
And what I'm getting at, I don't know, and I guess they in prosecuting the case that they can ask for in terms of restitution that can come back and help offset some of the costs. Is that even an opportunity?
Yes, it could be an opportunity where a part of the sentence could be a restitution back to the city for the testing costs.
That's something I think should be a different conversation.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Thank you. Chief, I feel that this is a very good gesture to move toward this. We've asked our staff to be creative, to do things that can save. And when I look at the benefits of what we would get from this, it would be a positive. Because we are going to receive a shorter time. And then you brought up the point that I was interested in other folks using the facility. We're going to make money. So you're saying $108,000 a year to be spent, but I think that money will come back quick. I think this is very good, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you. I see Iredell County, and help me with my geography. Is that not Statesville? Okay, and they have their own right now, the Sheriff's Department?
The Sheriff's Department.
And that would mean probably that Statesville Police utilizes that lab, right? From looking at the figures, so what we're doing is as they say in the neighborhood, we banking on the come line that others will come and support us. They supporting us, like you said, but they haven't given us monetary support. Correct me if I'm wrong, I read in the Journal a week or so ago where the county manager said, or somebody from the county, said that no one had really talked to them about this. They think it's a great concept or idea. So the conversations we're having, Chief, is there somewhere that we think we're going to be able to get somebody to help buy into this? Not that we probably couldn't do it on our own, but if they don't buy in on the front end, can we kind of give them a little rate, on the back end for not coming with us on the front end?
Yes, ma'am, I think so. I'm not sure about what the county manager's comments were, but we definitely have made we've had conversations with members of the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office from the county, also High Point Police Department.
But you feel comfortable, as Ms. Councilmember Burke was saying, that there's enough people that we feel like once we get it up, and you know how it is, everybody's not going to be able to support it financially right now, but you feel comfortable with knowing that once we get it established, they will come, as they say, once you build it.
Yes, I think so, and also from the defense bar, there have been some conversations about some of the local defense bar even want to have drugs or things tested in the lab if it's available.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
I was going to say, I do visit the county manager as a county taxpayer, and we have some history. We don't need to get hung. I'm not talking about with him. I'm talking about with the county in general. We don't need to use our time. They see how resourceful this is. It is going to work. And so, Mr. Chairman, I just see this as something that we could move forward, and I'm sure that the chief and whomever he assigns this will be giving us a report ever so often to see how it's moving along.
Yes, ma'am, and I agree that financially and geographically this makes sense. I believe that this particular project will eventually pay for itself, and geographically, as was mentioned, the other North Carolina cities that have labs are Charlotte, Raleigh, and Iredell County. So there's much room for growth and improvement with this, and I think it's an innovative and a new idea. It's an outside-of-the-box type of thinking, Chief, and we appreciate you bringing this to the table. Councilman Blight.
Thank you. Yeah, just let me make sure I understand this. This is, in fact, an independent lab, and we could count on savings for the city just simply by getting outside users to add volume. They would give us a break then. This company would give us a break. Am I thinking correctly?
Yes, we could get a reduction in On the proposed contract, depending on how many users we have, our rate could be reduced.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if no one else wishes to be heard, I don't believe that this is an action item. It looks like the general consensus from the council members and the committee members at the table is to move forward. Mr. City Manager or Madam City Attorney, well, I'll address the City Manager. What's the process for moving forward?
We will negotiate the contract and bring it back for council's approval.
Okay, we'll ask that you negotiate the contract and, as Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Burke mentioned, keep us updated every step of the way. Thank you, Mr. Manager. Chief, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Item G2.
Item G2, Winston-Salem Police Department SWAT update.
Members of the committee and council members, there's been much discussion about SWAT over the last several months. I've asked the chief and the city manager to bring this information forward for update and for information for anyone who wishes to hear it. Assistant Chief Weaver will be giving the presentation.
Good evening, Chair Taylor.
Good evening.
Vice Chair Burke, other members of the City Council.
Good evening.
I'm W.S. Weaver II, Assistant Chief of the Field Services Bureau of the Police Department. I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow us to discuss SWAT and also our Special Operations Division. My entire career track has been concentrated on the response to, mitigation of, and recovery from high-risk incidents. I am your longest-serving SWAT team member, and I have been on call for SWAT-related incidents since 1988. Across the Sundays in July, the Winston-Salem Journal published a series of articles which narrowly focused on the American Civil Liberties Union report regarding the militarization of American policing. We spent a considerable amount of time, both through the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, and with the police department, explaining to the Journal that there is so much more to the Winston-Salem Police Department SWAT team and Special Operations Division that we do to protect our citizens from violent incidents and violent people. Our team's utilized in a variety of manners, and they're all designed to save lives and keep our community safe. Just to start, to go through a quick run of our organizational chart. The Field Services Bureau contains both the Patrol Division and, as you see to the lower part of the organizational chart, the Special Operations Division. That division is commanded by Captain J.T. Watson. He's here.
Where is he? Yes, stand so we can see.
And the SWAT team itself is commanded by Lieutenant B.H. Hudson. He's also here. But aside from just the SWAT team, when we have incidents that involve, barricaded subject or hostage incidents, there are two other units that work exclusively with that group to make sure that we can become successful in resolving these incidents. And that's the Hazardous Devices Unit and also our crisis negotiation teams, and we'll talk about those for a minute. Our SWAT team started back in 1983. Its inception was called the Special Enforcement Team, and it was the concept of former Chief of Police George Sweat, who at the time was the captain of the Special Operations Division. Originally, the team was staffed with 1 sergeant and 6 officers. It's a full-time unit. It was then, it still is now, which means we have a sergeant and 6 officers who are capable of doing SWAT-related activities full-time. But by 1993 and 1994, as some of us began moving into different areas within the department, we realized that we could not lose the knowledge, training, and experience of some of the members who had experience on the Special Enforcement Team. So therefore, we created a part-time element which takes all of the people who have had previous experience who want to remain involved with this, and we keep them on so that we can utilize the benefits of both their knowledge, their training, and their experience. At the same time, through 1993-94, we added a full-time crisis negotiator team. Prior to that, our SWAT team members were doing their own negotiations when it came to talking to people who we were trying to negotiate with, and we felt like we needed a little more expertise in that area, so we moved that out to other personnel within the agency. This is just a picture of us in 1989. If you look at the picture standing to my right-hand side, that's Assistant Chief Brian Blakely. He's here. And also, if you look towards the standing to the left, that's former Assistant Chief K.B. Leonard. Wow. 1997, 2005. And starting in 2011, under our previous administration, the name was changed from the Special Enforcement Team to the SWAT Team. We've got a rigorous selection process for those officers who desire to be SWAT team members. It consists of both simultaneous physical and mental challenges. There's an extensive amount of training that starts with a basic operator's course. That is supplemented by advanced in-service training in a variety of high-risk operations. And also, our team members train 16 to 20 hours per month, year-round. Our extensive training is also guided by our unusual occurrence general order. We have a critical incident manual that talks about all different types of unusual occurrences and critical incidents that we consult. We also have standard operating procedures. Because our department is accredited, we follow the accreditation standards of the Commission for Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies, or CALEAs. And we also follow the best practices, and we are members of the National Tactical Officers Association and the North Carolina Tactical Officers Association. For our SWAT and our crisis negotiation team, our SWAT teams trained to respond to and mitigate hostage incidents, barricaded persons, persons firing weapons indiscriminately, or rescue of citizens or officers under fire. While at the same time, our crisis negotiation team members are trained to communicate with criminals holding hostages, armed persons exhibiting signs of mental illness, and armed persons contemplating suicide. We have crisis intervention training. All crisis negotiation team members and SWAT team personnel, as well as a significant number of our patrol police officers, are trained in crisis intervention. And what we do with the crisis intervention training, that educates our officers in assisting people with mental illness. That helps our officers to be able to de-escalate incidents, and it reduces our physical confrontations and inappropriate arrest. And what I mean by inappropriate arrest is when we are dealing with a person who's having a mental crisis, arresting them under criminal charges and placing them into the law enforcement detention center or the jail doesn't serve any real good purpose. So what we do is, by being able to identify a person that's having a mental crisis, we provide for psychological treatment for them through the involuntary commitment process. The utilization of our SWAT-trained personnel, of course, we've already talked about the barricaded subject or the hostage or the sniper incident, but we also deal with dignitary protection, special event security. We serve search warrants on violent or chronic offenders. We conduct search and rescue operations. We conduct searches for missing and abducted children or adults. We serve as perimeter security for suspicious packages and weapons of mass destruction, as well as hazmat emergencies. We're involved in pandemic biological events, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We're there for the civil disorder, which may require mass arrest or evacuations, or Smith Reynolds Airport emergencies, mass fatality events, or terrorist attacks. Uh-oh. Some of the things we've done. We assisted Wake Forest University in 1988 and October 10, 2000 with the presidential debate. This was Bush 41 versus Gore. You see at the Polo and Wingate Road entrance to Wake Forest, we had a significant number of protesters that wanted to come onto campus and disrupt the debate. What you see in the next picture off to the right side of the frame, the sergeant that's standing there, is actually Captain Scott Bricker, who's the captain over the Professional Standards Division. And at that point, he's deployed his team along a line to keep the protesters from coming on campus. And we were also backed up by the Forsyth County Sheriff's Department, and you see some sheriff's deputies standing there also. In October 21st of 2007, we conducted a Haines Mall Homeland Security exercise. That exercise, we were fortunate enough to have 200 volunteers, and we were also fortunate enough to work with our partners with the University of North Carolina School of the Arts to actually come in and utilize makeup and other types of art equipment to simulate true wounds on our victims who were all involved in that. That particular incident started off with multiple active shooters inside the food court at the mall, and it culminated with the release of a chemical weapon inside the mall. What you see on the right side of the photograph are our SWAT team members who are dressed out in hazardous materials gear, up to and including wearing self-contained breathing apparatus, assisting citizens out of the mall to medical treatment, while at the same time being able to take into custody one of the perpetrators that was involved in that particular scenario. Some of the things we've done more recently, you remember our 29-hour standoff on University Parkway? And just last Friday, the arrest of a suicidal man after a 10-hour standoff in the Ardmore neighborhood off of Ardsley and Gales Avenue. Some of the special event security that we do. You know, we've had presidential visits, and we've had a significant number of those over the past 2 decades. Your SWAT team and the Special Operations Division is responsible for the security planning and a lot of the security staffing of those events. Keep in mind that presidential visits require coordination with both federal and state authorities, but we also have to be able to deal with motorcade routes, protest groups, suspicious packages, and other things that may happen during some of these special events. For example, Dr. Angelo's funeral. Not only did we have to deal with the First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, coming in, but also former President Bill Clinton, United States Attorney General Eric Holder, Oprah Winfrey, and other celebrities and VIPs, which included some of you. Now, while dealing with some of the motorcade routes and the security of the Wake Forest campus, we had to be prepared to deal with any protesters. And at one point, Westboro Baptist Church had advised that they were going to come to this event in protest, while at the same time we had another group that was going to respond to do a counter-protest. So it's your SWAT team that does all the security planning for those types of events so that we don't have a negative event occur. The Dixie Classic Fair upcoming in 2014, and then, of course, the National Black Theater Festival coming up in 2015. We, with the Special Operations Division and SWAT team, do a significant amount of security planning for those events, because if you think about it, with the sheer number of people, the sheer volume of people that will be coming, we've got to have trained professionals there who are not only prepared to deal with missing children, drunk or obnoxious people, or aggressive panhandlers, but we've got to be able to deal with suspicious packages, suspicious backpacks. We've got to be able to deal with the active shooter threat. And unfortunately, in today's times, we've got to take into consideration terrorist attacks up to and including suicide bomber threats. So that's the reality. And I believe it's your expectation that we're able to professionally respond to and mitigate those types of incidents. Some of the things we've done: violent offender apprehension. If you're familiar with the school counselor in Newton, North Carolina, that was killed back in June, the perpetrator of that event came and stayed with family here in Winston-Salem. It was your SWAT team that went and made that arrest. Searches for missing children and adults. Mr. Porter was missing from about 90 days or so. By October 2012, your SWAT team and your Special Operations Division, because of the leadership that they have and the specialized training that they have, was able to put together a plan to do a significant search in the East Ward, which led to the discovery of Mr. Porter. Unfortunately, he was deceased, but we were able to recover his body for the closure for the family. Currently now, we're working with our Criminal Investigations Division on our current missing person, Larry Brian Haynes, who's been missing since June. We're still trying to locate him, and whatever leads that come up, whether they're through Criminal Investigations Division or come up through the Patrol Division, we're able to put together a significant amount of people to go out and do some searches or follow up those leads to locate Mr. Haynes if we can. Our medical response capability. You're familiar with everything that's going on with Ebola in West Africa. Well, we have to be prepared to be engaged with the Forsyth County Department of Public Health and the Office of Emergency Management to be able to assist with any kind of pandemic disease outbreak. In the event, at the direction of Public Health, that there's some type of mass vaccination site to give vaccines to the Forsyth County residents, it's your SWAT team that's going to provide the security for those sites. And also working with the SWAT team and the crisis negotiation team is the Hazardous Devices Unit, or the Bomb Squad. They're trained to respond to, mitigate, and recover chemical agent devices, biological agent devices, radiological, nuclear, explosive, and incendiary devices. With the Hazardous Devices Unit, as those specialized technicians are working on the actual device, they have to have perimeter security. That's the security that's going to be provided by your SWAT team. And all of this comes together during the incident at Carver High School back in August. Fortunately, with that incident, We're able to have quick shooter apprehension by the SRO of the student who specifically targeted another student at the conclusion of a fire drill. Once Officer Wilson called for assistance, our personnel responded to Carver High School, and we were able to quickly secure both the exterior and the interior of Carver High School campus by WSPD. Now, what that allowed us to do by dominating the interior of that structure, we were able to ensure that there were no additional shooters there, there were no suspicious packages or backpacks that we might have to deal with or anything else along the explosive line. But by dominating that structure, we're also able to have immediate access to multiple victims, whether it's by fire or through EMS. That would be the program that will occur at any of our high schools in the event we have any type of active shooter event. Now, your SWAT team and your Special Operations Division personnel leadership will come in, as we did at Carver's High School, and be able to put together a plan, because once we were ensured that there were no additional shooters and that we had all of the victims taken care of medically, the next priority for us was reuniting the children with their parents. And so from that case, your leadership is able to come in, develop a quick plan, be able to get those students back to their parents, and at the same time give enough information out so that the parents will understand what's going on with their kids and how they can be reunited with their kids, and then push forward with that plan so we can secure the school. Once we get the school secured, then at that point our Criminal Investigations Division comes in, conducts a thorough investigation of the incident. We don't have anything to hide, and we share all of the aspects of SWAT that we can, with the exception of specific tactics. And that's because we don't want people to develop countermeasures for the tactics or the things we're going to have to do to resolve some of these incidents. So here's where we have some of our equipment on display at the Winston-Salem Centennial. Back in the spring, we conducted a conference for the Central North Carolina Negotiators Network. We had crisis and hostage negotiators from all over Central North Carolina come to Winston-Salem, and what you're seeing in the picture depicted there, if you can see from Captain Thompson moving all the way back, those are the hostage negotiators for the Winston-Salem Police Department. They're thanking us for hosting that event. Just as we have a Citizen Police Academy, and just as the City of Winston-Salem has City of Winston-Salem University to be able to explain to our citizens what it is we do as city government, we also have a Youth Citizen Police Academy. And as a part of the youth that are going through that to understand what's going on with the police department, we give them access to our SWAT team. Here you see a bunch of our kids, and where we're giving tours with them against our armored rescue vehicle. One of the other things that we do with public education is a spring explosion with our hazardous devices unit. Now what this is, and you see Detective King standing there with what appears to be a regular Easter egg, so to speak, but our hazardous devices unit puts an electronic package in those eggs. We partner with Industries for the Blind to have an egg hunt for our visually impaired children. So they'll take those eggs, they'll spread them out, and those kids will have the ability to enjoy an Easter egg hunt by listening to the beeping that's coming from those eggs. So that's one of the things that we do as a part of our public education. And of course, we were at National Night Out. That's in the Ogden Station neighborhood, where we took our hazardous devices unit and they were able to get some of their equipment out so that our residents could see what we do, and we talked to them about that also. That's our hazardous devices unit with some of their equipment. Part of our crisis negotiators and our SWAT team for 2014. Let me close by saying this. I've been in a significant number of meetings where Mayor Pro Tem Burke has asked our city manager, are we ready? She's also asked our fire chief, Anthony Farmer, the director of the Office of Emergency Management, Mel Sadler, and my own police chief, are we ready? We can stand here and confidently say to you, yes, ma'am, we are ready. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Assistant Chief Weaver, I think you put it very, very well. We're ready, and we don't have anything to hide. I think we all wanted to have this update to show the public we're not hiding anything, and we are being open and as transparent as we can possibly be. because the police department is paid for by tax dollars, and it's important that they know what's going on in their and all of our communities. So thank you for that presentation. There's no doubt in my mind that the police department, SWAT, Special Operations Division, works to ensure the safety, the public safety, and the public health of all of our citizens. With that being said, are there any questions for Assistant Chief Weaver? Councilmember Montgomery.
One question in the hazardous materials unit. How, and as much as you can share in reference to that, how do you all determine if an item is a risk person? Only reason I think this time last week you all had an incident. I was trying to get back home and I had to make a detour because of something. I know in the airport, if you leave something, automatically they're gonna
If
do
someone
something.
calls us and they state that there is a package that they're not familiar with, when we respond, we treat it as if it's suspicious, so to speak. Typically, the first thing we try and do is figure out who it belongs to, and if we determine that we cannot find an owner of it or it's something that's unusual to the facility, then we contact our hazardous devices units and they come in and they do things to determine whether or not it's hazardous or not.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Yes, I was going to say thank you very much for that report. We appreciate it. Mr. City Manager, when we're talking to citizens about the budget, I think these are the kinds of things they need to know. We have first-class equipment. We have well-trained people who carry out the duties and responsibilities. And when we tell them and can show them, the important thing, show them, this equipment that we get, it's plenty of money. I'd like to know myself about how much money not that we don't put a dollar sign on safety, but about how much money are we talking about with the things that we've seen you present, pieces of equipment?
Well, for the armored rescue vehicle, we're looking at $400,000 just with it. And then there's individualized equipment, and there are other things that we've bought. So we're spending a significant amount of money on it, but we're trained on it, we're competent with it, and we're using it to save lives. And in cases where we can, putting things into place ahead of time so that we can counter any contingencies that may occur. In 2014, we're concerned about a variety of different threats, and we're trying to be able to counter those as best we can.
And I just said that, Mr. Chairman, to say citizens don't mind when they can see how the money is spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Light.
Thanks so much for your report.
Yes, ma'am.
I think a lot of the hysteria caused by the one study, this will counter that. Because, I mean, certainly the case that study quoted was a horrible incident, but that's not the norm. And I think you have just presented the norm for Winston-Salem.
Yes, ma'am, and that's the way our team has been since its inception in 1983. And just if I can, to go a little bit further, we're so concerned about the mental health aspect of it that we have a significant number of people that are involved in the crisis intervention training, like I said. But I do want to point out Captain Thompson here, who is not only your commander of the crisis negotiation team, her full-time job is the commander of the Criminal Investigations Division, but she is also the president-elect of the Forsyth County Board of Mental Health Association. And so we're tied in that deeply so that we can deal with some of the mental health issues that we're having. And just this past week during National Night Out, we attended one of these seminars over at the Enterprise Center on Martin Luther King, which discussed gun violence as a public health epidemic. And so we're not only looking at it from just the, gun side of it, but we're trying to be a little academic in it also.
May Captain Thomas stand up too?
Captain. Councilmember Adams.
Thank you. Assistant Chief Weaver,
Yes, ma'am.
you know I'm your babysitter.
I do know that, ma'am.
That's right.
Just in case he forgot.
He knows. I have to remind him. I am always so proud and so in awe of our public safety personnel. Not that I don't like all of the staff. I love all of you, but anybody that puts their life on the line 24 hours a day, every day of the year in, year out, you guys are like superheroes to me, I blow my horn and wave at you on the street, and I know you don't know who I am when I'm running past you at Wake Forest. they look at me like, who is that? It doesn't matter. I just like to tell you always what a great job you do. I think in the times that we live in, and we all know, times have changed. People expect much, but they don't want to really know much. But then something happens and they do. I think the Winston-Salem Police Department has done a tremendous job over the 30 years even that the SWAT has been in operation. Again, I tell people when you call 911 and there's something wrong, we show up to do our jobs. That's what we're paid to do. But we just don't do them for pay. We do them because you have a heart. You guys have a heart. And I just want you to know that in spite of, again, we get bad press, so you can get bad press too. It's just spread around a little bit. And I also hope that the citizens of Winston-Salem, again, realize, as Mayor Pro Tem and the Chair of Public Safety knows, we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of money, and we spend a lot trying to educate the public about what we're about and what you're about to alleviate any fears that they have in you doing your job. So again, I would ask, along with the council and my peers, don't take it personal that people sometimes want to attack what you do. Again, I need you to just go out and do your job, that you do it. Anything that's different, that's why you got the chief, that's why you're assistants, that's why you got all these other people, and you have us to explain, and the city manager and his staff, if we're not going to be perfect all the time because every situation is different, and you guys have to function with that type of mindset all the time. But again, I thank you for this report. I thank you, Chief, all of your staff for coming to educate us even more. And I thank you for being public about it, as we always are. And please keep up the good work. And again, God bless each and every one of you for what you do every day.
Thank you, ma'am. And you spoke about heart, and I'll end it with this. A significant number of the guys that we have who are actually operators on the team are supervisors. They're sergeants, lieutenants, all the way up to captains, and of course I'm there. We receive no extra pay for what we do for the city of Winston-Salem. It's only what we're doing as our regular pay, and so we're doing it because we want to protect our community.
Thank you, Assistant Chief Weaver. If there's nothing further, we appreciate what you do within all of the police department, and we'll move forward to item G3.
Item G3, report on audit of fire department personal protective equipment.
Giving this report will be our Assistant Manager, Mr. Greg Turner.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this will be a short report. I won't have a PowerPoint presentation or anything like that, but I do want to assure you that the manager asked me and directed me to perform an audit of the personal protective equipment in the fire department. As you recall, there were some concerns about whether the fire staff had adequate personal protective equipment to do their job and whether that equipment was compliant with federal standards and fire standards. Personal protective equipment in the fire department consists of coats, pants, gloves, boots, hoods, and helmets. Now that is to distinguish it from other pieces of equipment that a firefighter would wear going into a fire, such as their air pack or their self-contained breathing apparatus. But those 5 or 6 pieces I've just indicated are what's considered the personal protective equipment. Under National Fire Protection Association standards, 1851, that equipment, it specifies how that equipment is to be acquired, maintained, and used over the years. In 2008, that standard changed to require that that equipment be in service no longer than 10 years. Prior to that date, there was no termination date or no lifetime requirement on that equipment. There was a requirement that it be kept in service and that if deficiencies developed or tears, rips, burns, whatever developed so that the equipment was no longer providing that protection, that it be removed. But there was no 10-year lifetime prior to 2008. Also prior to 2008, fire department staff were implicitly encouraged to have 2 sets of equipment, even though the city funded and provided 1 set of equipment. The reason for that is that they, the firefighters and their captains, realized that a firefighter would need to have 2 pieces of equipment in case something happened with their first set, or in case their first set was being washed or repaired and an incident required them to respond. So there was a staff philosophy in the fire department to scrounge, if you will, for second sets of equipment. Even though they were being provided with one set, there was a desire to have a second set. I will, at this point, go ahead and advise the committee that when you approved last year's budget, when the city council approved last year's budget, you approved funding so that all firefighters would be able to have two sets of equipment. But this philosophy of having two sets of equipment prior to 2008 was relevant, well, was regularly distributed throughout the department. After 2008, when the rule for not having equipment over 10 years went into effect, the ability to inventory what was older than 10 years was really impossible. So what we did was we looked at whether the department had good records on what had been distributed to employees in their inventory system. They kept track of the information in something called the book. The managers in the department who looked at the book realized it was out of date, so they directed staff, firefighters, to complete a new inventory sheet that indicated what did they actually have, how old was it, etc. When they spot checked that information, they found that even it was out of date. The information that was being provided to the department supervisors from the employees was still out of date. So what we did in trying to determine whether the department had issued sufficient amounts of information or sufficient amounts of material, personal protective equipment, was we looked at what was being distributed from the city's central warehouse. And if you refer to the table on page 20, what you will see is that over the 10 years since 2004, there have been 200 or 2 or 3 times the amount of equipment distributed as relates to the number of employees who are in the department. The conclusions you can draw from that are that the equipment is being regularly replaced and that there's a very high probability that all the equipment is less than 10 years old because of the turnover rate. The other thing that I'll point out is that there is one exception, and that is the helmets. There's only slightly under 100% of the helmets that have been replaced over that time period. But the department does have a program to do repair of helmets in-house, and so that's the explanation for why helmets have not been changed out as frequently as others. And also, equipment that you would expect to have a higher wear-out rate or a higher damage rate, like gloves, are replaced at a higher rate than other personal protective equipment. The conclusion that I have drawn is that there is a high probability that the department's equipment is compliant with National Fire Protective Requirement 1851, and that the policy change or the budget change that the council approved should go a long way toward eliminating firefighters holding on to older equipment that is no longer in service. There's also a requirement that the fire captains inspect equipment that's in the stations to make sure that it is compliant with 1851, and firefighters themselves are responsible for making sure that their equipment is compliant with that standard. With all of those things in place, it should be comforting to City Council to know that there is a very low likelihood that any firefighters are having to use equipment that is out of date. Be happy to answer any questions that you have.
I know this committee wants to make sure that the citizens are safe, and also we want to make sure that the firemen and women who serve our citizens are safe. And I know the chief, as of late, has been fighting to make sure that the fire department getting the tools and the equipment that they need to keep the firefighters and the citizens safe. So thank you for your work as well, Chief, and Chief Arm is recognized. Members of the committee, council members, do you have any questions or concerns for Mr. Turner? Councilmember Light.
What set off this spasm about our folks not having adequate personal protective equipment? Was it a charge leveled against the department?
There was a complaint from employees, as I understood
Okay. This certainly looks to refute those complaints.
Mayor Pro Tem
Thank
Burke.
you.
Oh, did I interrupt you,
No,
Councilman Relay?
no, that's good.
Mayor Pro Tem Burke.
Thank you. I'm pleased that this report will be given to us. Here again, it's easy to misinterpret and misunderstand. At times when some people can be unhappy, they say things that are not true. And here we talk again about being transparent. And we say it over and over again. We're open. We're open. The equipment that's no longer in use, that they don't need, what do you do with that equipment, Mr. Turner?
The fire department now, because of the new rule, removes that from service for firefighting. They take it to the Beatty maintenance facility, or Beatty training facility, and they are allowed to use it for training and other non-fire suppression activities.
Thank you.
And Mr. Turner, just to make sure I'm clear, it is the responsibility of the captains to make sure that this particular equipment is not being used.
Both the employee, firefighter, and the captain. Yes, sir.
The employee, firefighters, and the captains, and chief, and the assistant chiefs, we want to make sure you're leaning on them the right way. As we know we want to do everything decent and in order. Anybody else wish to be recognized?
I need this. Oh, go ahead.
We'll let her finish, Mayor Pro Tem, then we'll come to you,
This is what
Councilman.
I need to say. When that came up, I asked the city manager, at times we have suggestion boxes. Employees have the opportunity to suggest, put things in the box and make people aware of what's going on. Nobody says that they cannot do it, so it's open. Thank you.
Councilmember Adams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mr. Turner, I noticed that you said, and I read the report, that somehow I felt like there was some ambivalence as to say that we have resolved this issue. My question would be, again, and I'm basing it on my subject matter expertise as a lead auditor for Johnson Controls for umpteen years. When there's a problem and corrective action is initiated, we always ask, is the problem solved? Is the problem solved?
The problem is in the process of being solved, in my opinion. I did not find a significant problem or high probability that there is a problem. The fundamental problem that is a concern is that the record system isn't up to what we would expect in order to have 100% assurance that every single firefighter's piece of equipment is known by serial number and when it was assigned to them and when it goes out of date. The department's in the process of updating their inventory system with supervisor checking of information in order to make sure that happens. But as far as the actual allocation of equipment, it appears that that is appropriate. But as far as tracking it to the individual person and knowing when it's going to expire, that's still a work in process.
Okay. And that gets back to, as you know, can we verify again that the problem has either been solved or corrected? And you're telling me that they're in the process of creating an inventory system of some sort that lends itself to verification as to who is getting what pieces of equipment when it is issued and when it is returned. Because in the middle of all that, you'll find, if that is documented, that you will find who is not turning the equipment back in. Hence, therefore, as the chair stated, I'm thinking there's a process, but are we really following the process? And going back to the documentation of the process, if there is no documented process, policies, or procedures that are updated, reviewed, whatever, changed, then we're back where we started. And when we do this, chief and staff, we need to know when that documentation occurs, when is it occurring, how is the process changing, who's responsible at this point now that the process has changed to make sure that the process stays in compliance. If we don't have documents, and from what I see the documents, and maybe they are what they are, copies, in systems like this, because we're talking safety and federal and other standards that we have to follow, there should be a nomenclature documentation system to even the documents that we have listed here, such as the this fire administration's and operations City of Winston, this First Amendment B that you gave us, as well as Amendment A, Attachment A and B. I see a date, but in my mind, because I'm an auditor, I'm seeing February 2007, that's 7 years ago. Are you telling me we have not updated or done any changes to this document since it was put here, since it was created?
You're referring to General Order 1.2.1, 2?
2.1, 2.2, 212, yeah.
That is the date that it was in effect at the time of this review. However, the department's in the process of updating this general order and has a new one that hasn't been distributed or wouldn't affect these audit results.
Okay, but because we're now talking about systems, and Mr. Garrity, you heard me talk about this now for 5 years. These are the kinds of things I say that we're good, but we can be better. This is not to beat anybody, as Mayor Pro Tem said, on the chair across the head. We just need to get better so we can help the citizens understand that we're working to get better. I see, as an auditor, I see issues with our documentation and our policies and procedures, and we've talked about that, particularly those that have reference to start with, our public safety sector. All of them are important all up and down the chain, but these are very important that they need to be for legal purposes. They need to be documents with reference numbers and revision dates and who was the last person that reviewed it. And in our procedures, we need to have who is responsible to review and update the documents and when they do it. I would like to, if I can, I would be open to help you again. You guys said I need another job or something. But I would be open to reviewing the documents, particularly for this area, and then we can use it as a prototype to move on to other areas to ensure that we're in compliance and the employees and the citizens know that we're doing that. Again, I just think right now, Mr. Turner, and we can talk about this later, I still believe there's some holes in this, even though, as Councilmember Burke said, there's not an issue probably, but from the documentation, it does appear that there is an issue, and it's not necessarily with what we're doing, but how we document how we're doing it, and I do see an issue with that. Because if we don't have documentation and sign-off from each individual fire personnel, when they get their equipment, they sign off. It's dated. Somebody else, the supervisor, signs off, dated. And when they turn in, we have to have the same document brought back out, sign it, date it, returned XYZ, supervisor signs it, dates it. Then we got verification that we're doing our job, and there is no mistake about it. Right now, as Mr. Turner has said, the documentation doesn't lend itself, Chairman Taylor, to that. So again, I think we need to do some more to this, and again, I'm volunteering to help in any aspect that I can to help correct this.
And Councilmember Adams, by sheer nature of your position as a council member, I think everyone would definitely welcome as much input and help as you would want to bring to the table. We appreciate you being willing to support the process and the fire department as well. Councilmember Montgomery.
Question. In reference to the systems, and I think as we continue to work through this, I think we'll only get better in terms of process. At the end of the day, I think that's what everybody wants to make sure that everybody is safe, both when individuals go out to respond as well as individual citizens. Question in reference to, I know we have systems in place in other areas, and I don't know, Chief may be able to answer this question better, but just like on this city-issued iPad, has a label and barcode on the back of here in terms of where it was issued, and I'm sure if you pull up the number that somewhere can say that this was issued to Councilmember Montgomery. And so within not just the fire department, but within the police department as well, are there systems that exist there that could be, I don't know if it's something that's specific to fire, that they have to have it specific that way, specific to police that has to be that way, but a public safety system that does similar same, and that may be what's already been done. I may not be aware of it, but just wondering if that's something there.
And Chief, before you comment, there's been a lot of discussion about the fire department, and we hadn't addressed you as the chief. So forgive me for not doing that. If you would address Councilmember Montgomery's question, please.
I'd like to say good evening to the committee,
Good
Mayor Pro Tem,
evening.
committee chair, council members. The department in the past has utilized the warehouse to distribute gear for the firefighters. There's a combination of the warehouse record and our record that has maintained who has the gear. So there's a paper trail of receiving the gear, a supervisor approves that gear, then the battalion chief maintains that record in his office. What we found on the book that Mr. Turner used in 2010 when we purchased new gear to meet the 10-year compliance, the book was developed to create a history of who had gear and give a record so we could purchase new gear and then develop an ongoing record for firefighters that would need replacement gear from 2010 on. And what we found, as Mr. Turner mentioned, was the information in that document was not as accurate as it should be. And so what this staff has done, they started in January developing a database to collect that information, to collect the dates. There's an actual electronic file now that covers who has gear, when they received it, the dates, the repairs, and those kinds of things. And that process is almost finished now. It takes a lot of effort to get over 319 people's gear, and there are pieces of garment. The helmet is a record, the hood is a record, the pants are a record. So they're working to get all that information in the correct format so that we can maintain who has what and have an ongoing record. So this process of buying gear and keeping adequate gear in the house can be properly documented. And so that process has taken place. The document that you mentioned, the general order, has also been updated to make sure that the people in positions, the captains, the firefighters, are documenting, signing off, and those documentations are being followed also. If a firefighter has any damaged equipment, any damaged gear, there's a memo process in place. So a memo is written that generates the action that follows to get that gear replaced, whether it's a piece of equipment on the truck, their turnout gear. So that process is in place, and it is being improved and ready to roll out as we speak right now. And staff is here. They have some of that documentation. They're not prepared to show it tonight, but they have it just in case we wanted to see some of that information tonight.
Well, thank you, Chief. To me, it sounds like you all are on top of it and moving in the right direction. So I appreciate your hard work and the rest of the staff hard work in trying to, one, make sure we have system in place, but even responding to what happens and comes up just being in business. Sometimes you have things like this, and I think we're doing a good job in responding to that. But overall, the day-to-day pieces of it, I think those are the things that are looking good as well.
And in addition, this inquiry about gear came up because of the OSHA investigation. That was one of the inquiries on that 16-item letter that we received. That was one of the complaint items. And of course, we've sent information in to respond to that and to demonstrate what our people have and how we go about getting equipment for our firefighters. That's how that complaint came about.
Mayor Pro Tem Burt.
Yes, this is for the chief. I believe that we can look at all of our departments and pass some of the information or share what Councilwoman discussed earlier. I critique just about everything we do, and now that I'm on the internet, I critique the nation. I'm a teacher, short time, counsel long, then managing people. But when people write, I go through the computer and I tell them how to use the words too long and writing too long and talking too long. But when we look at this, people in jobs, no matter how smart you are, don't misunderstand a thing I'm saying. What we have failed to do is to do 4 things. First, you have a problem. When you have that problem, you use critical thinking. Mm-hmm. Then you analyze it and you look at the process. A lot of people get in these jobs and they don't use it. I don't care what kind of degrees they have. And this is what, when you hire people, you're going to have to emphasize more of that. Some of us are good in what we do, but sometimes our ears get closed to how we ought to do it. I critique everything with this city manager that we have class about what and how. because there are too many people in other people's space, and we should be a little more accountable in the space that we've been hired to be in.
I like that.
And we can use our time wisely. And if we use it wisely, we don't have time to do anything but that job. I told the people who work here, some of them, you're hired to work from 8 to 5. These other jobs with the city manager, and you're in charge of things, your work day is different. But when people come to work, you don't impress it. If I was in charge, me, if you come at 8 and you stay 6 and 7, because you stay 6 and 7 sometimes because while you're there from 8 to 5, you and everybody else's business, but your own.
I knew it was coming.
Really, really, I'm telling you, I walk through this building. I walk through these buildings, and I watch that. Use your time to the fullest. And when you do that, you don't have time for other things. I'm going to give one other example. When I first started teaching, when the day was over, a teacher would come and say, "Come on, we're up in so-and-so's room." Well, I didn't have any more sense. I went flocking to so-and-so's room. I was an inexperienced teacher. Then I noticed, what were they doing? In there talking about nothing. So I decided not to go into so-and-so's room. And she came down and she said, "Why aren't you coming to the room?" I said, "Well, the reason I'm not coming is because this is my planning time. I should not have to carry work home when they're giving me the time to plan for my children for the next day." She said, "Oh, you're trying to be so important." I say, "No, I'm just trying to do my job and prepare myself." So if we use the time like we ought to, Mr. City Manager, and I want to tell you, you all know I like my city manager. No doubt about it. I'm going to tell you why I like the city manager. He never gets angry with me, no matter what I say. He doesn't get angry with any of us. Have you noticed that?
That's a good reason.
He's a tolerant person, and he's a patient person. And I truly believe that he has his heart at the right place in trying to take care of all these 200 and some thousand people in this city. And he wants to treat all of us, and each elected official to know that each ward is important.
Mm-hmm.
So I respect and appreciate this.
I just want to conclude this item by saying that I feel like there are no perfect people. There are no perfect departments. The fire department isn't perfect. The police department isn't perfect. As a public safety chairman, as a council member, I'm not perfect. But I think every day we have a responsibility to our citizens to strive toward perfection. And I thank you for being willing to listen, Chief. I thank you for being willing to correct some of the issues that were discussed today. And, you know, there's been a question asked or mentioned from the police department. We are prepared. Are we ready? So I'll pose that same question to you, Chief. Are we ready?
Oh, yes, sir, definitely. Your fire department is ready, and I just want to be frank. This staff, stand up, please. These three gentlemen here, Chief Owens is not here, but this is one of the most accountable staff I have seen since I've been in this position, and comparing to people I've seen in the fire department years and years back. They're not afraid to hold people accountable, and that's where our department is now. We're at the place of holding each other accountable and making sure that things get done. They have a high level of desire to make things excellent, and that's what these men are doing. And you're going to see some great changing in your department in terms of what people do every day, from the street all the way to policies and process, and I'm quite confident in that.
And Chief, while they're standing, if you can introduce your staff. We know who they are, but...
Yes. Chief Harry Brown, he's our operations chief. Tad Byron, he's our training and safety.
Right.
And Frank Stowe is our logistics chief. And of course, Robert Owens is the fire marshal.
Thank all of you for what you do. Are there any other questions or concerns for Chief? Mr. Turner? Thank you, gentlemen. Is there anything else that we need to discuss for the good of the order?
May I just be brief?
Mayor Pro Tem.
One day this week, Miss Alberta Lyles will be 110 years old. Her birthday will be at Mount Zion Church. I have been to quite a few of her birthday parties. Last year, she was just as alert as she could be. I hope that I will be in that situation.
Me too.
The important thing, the mind working. And I don't want to live where I can't take care of myself. But I don't want to live, I'm going to tell you all. God knows I want to see some of these people who I see each and every day in city government get to be some our ages and see how they perform. But I don't want to live that long to see because I wouldn't be able to take care of myself. But Miss Alberta Lies, 110 years old, and we say happy birthday to her.
Happy birthday.
God bless her.
Absolutely.
Happy birthday to her. Chief, you have something else? Chief Roundtree's recognized.
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to make one quick announcement and also one quick introduction. This is National Forensic Science Week, and we have our forensics director here tonight, Director Karen Watson. If you stand, please. She's responsible for our Forensic Services Division. She's responsible for about 40 employees. They process crime scenes. They process the prisoners at the LEDC. And also, she's responsible for our major crime response unit.
So you kind of like the smart woman on CSI. Just own it, please do. If there's no further business for the good of the order, we'll consider this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you.